morning, everyone. Welcome to Caspian Policy Center. I'm Afgan Nifty, the Chief Executive Officer of the Caspian Policy Center. Today, we have a very exciting event. We are bringing a very special event covering the 30 years of partnership between Kazakhstan and the United States. For this event, we have gathered 4 former U.S. ambassadors to Kazakhstan to discuss the key developments of the U.S.-Kazakhstan relationship over the last 3 decades. And today, we are also welcoming the new Kazakhstan ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Yerzhan Ashikbayev. Thanks for taking time to be here with us on the start of your journey in Washington, D.C. Welcome to Washington. We are wishing you the best in your time spent here in D.C. In 1991, the United States became the first country to recognize Kazakhstan's independence. The 30 years of United States-Kazakhstan partnership since then have been marked by countless achievements across diplomatic, economic, and cultural areas. The Caspian Policy Center is also a firm believer of the U.S.-Kazakhstan partnership and understands the importance of Kazakhstan to the United States, along with the importance of the United States to Kazakhstan. On our website, a series of articles in conjunction with this event can be found that feature the reflections from the former U.S. ambassadors to Kazakhstan. In today's event, the ambassadors will personally share their views on the current state of the U.S.-Kazakhstan relationship and what the next decade might hold. I want to personally thank the speakers and participants, Ambassador William Courtney, Ambassador John Ordway, Ambassador Richard Hoagland, and Ambassador George Kroll for helping us to make this event possible today, and our own very own CPC team for putting this event together. A special thanks to our moderator, Brian Todd, who is an assistant professor of Central Asian Studies, Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. Now, let's turn over to the newly appointed Ambassador of Kazakhstan to the United States, His Excellency Yerzhan Ashikbayev, for his keynote remarks. Ambassador Ashikbayev, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Afgan. Very good morning to everyone. And Your Excellencies, it's my great pleasure to see you. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in person. You have standing invitation to the Embassy of Kazakhstan. But to begin with, I would like to thank Afgan Nifty, Chief Executive Officer of the Caspian Policy Center, for hosting such a wonderful event. And for us, 30th anniversary of independence, of course, is a milestone event and a great cause to celebrate. And thank you so much to everyone who joined today's webinar. Let me just quickly go through some of the achievements we've reached with distinguished ambassadors. Ambassador Bill Courtney stood at the early beginning of the establishment of our diplomatic relations, and he has been instrumental in reaching the famous oil contract with Chevron on Tengiz oil field, and he was the one who brought Vice President Al Gore to Kazakhstan, and this was the first such visit to Kazakhstan. Ambassador John Ordway, probably he has an unbeaten and unbeatable achievement of heading the U.S. Embassy, not even twice, but 3 times, being the head of U.S. mission in Kazakhstan. So delighted to see Ambassador Ordway. Ambassador Richard Hoagland, he's been a great friend of Kazakhstan. I have already seen him in person, and we very much recall warmly our interaction during Kazakhstan's presidency in Kazakhstan's chairmanship in OEC, and Secretary Clinton's visit to the only OEC summit in the 21st century, which our capital city, Astana, hosted in 2010. And finally, Ambassador George Kroll. Ambassador, I'm delighted to see you. My interlocutor in my previous capacity as Deputy Foreign Minister, and U.S. Ambassador who contributed to our milestone achievement of bringing our partnership to enhanced strategic partnership level. So I'm delighted to see you, and I would like to start from the very early days of our independence back in 1991, December 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed and Kazakhstan emerged as an independent nation, the 9th largest big landmass in the world, and the 4th largest nuclear arsenal. So that was a newborn country. It looked like these were two basic characteristics of the newborn country. We, of course, from the very early days, we were aware of our responsibilities vis-a-vis international community, and the first president, President Nursultan Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan, laid down the foundation of our foreign policy and all those important decisions that later on became the success stories of US-Kazakhstan's partnership. So I always reiterate that we are blessed with our neighbors, even though Kazakhstan is the biggest landlocked country in the world. Both Russia and China serve as our open seas. So we naturally establishing and developing our constructive, reliable, trusted relations with our neighbors. But since the early days, we understood that the foreign policy of Kazakhstan, aspiring to be a reliable member of the international community, should also be based on our relations with the United States. So the so-called multivectoral foreign policy is basically was initially based on this triad of important partners of Kazakhstan. Our close neighbors, Russia and Kazakhstan, and the US. So speaking about milestones, of course, there are different spheres, but let me, as probably many of our colleagues will will focus their remarks on three areas: security, economy, and democratic development. So in terms of security, of course, it was conscious choice of Kazakhstan to choose peaceful and democratic path. Kazakhstan joined NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, as a non-nuclear weapon state. We closed down the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site even before we proclaimed our independence, and that paved the way for a moratorium on nuclear test sites in other major testing sites in Nevada, Novaya Zemlya, Lopnor, Mururovo. This decision also paved the way for the adoption of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Those are spillovers, those are global consequences of our bilateral achievements, I would say. So simultaneously, Kazakhstan has become an full-fledged member of the United Nations, then OECE, OIC, and well, it still continues our cooperation in security fields. Fast forwarding to current times, we not only have excellent cooperation in the sphere of disarmament and non-proliferation of WMDs, but also we work closely on countering terrorism, on addressing other important issues, including our current interaction to contain the spread of COVID-19, and for which we are very much grateful. To promote Kazakhstan's strong commitment in democratic development, President Nursultan Nazarbayev and President Bill Clinton signed the Charter on Democratic Partnership back in 1994, and this laid the foundation for current ambitious reform agenda by President Tokayev. So we are now in the third package, implementation of third package of reforms. Just quickly, if I can name some of the measures taken by the government, those are a reduction of the threshold for political parties to enter the parliament from 7% to 5%, direct election of district hakims, so in rural areas, in small cities, election of hakims is under, we are preparing those electoral processes. We also should mention that those initial agreements and steps signed at the early days of our independence made sure that the reforms and democratic commitment of Kazakhstan are of irreversible nature. But at the same time, we followed the so-called Kazakhstani path, making sure that we don't compromise on the well-being, on the security and safety of our people. And Kazakhstan largely avoided any conflicts on its territory. And we are, by the way, the only country, still the only country in Central Asia which agreed upon all of its international borders, which include, for the audience, not for the ambassadors, of course, which include the largest, the longest land border in the world, stretching for over 7.5 thousand kilometers long. That's between Kazakhstan and Russia, which is even longer than continental part of borderline between US and Canada, and 1,800 kilometer borderline with China. And I've mentioned that Kazakhstan has been, was born big, I mean, the 9th largest landmass, but at the same time in regional overview, when compared to our neighbors, we are a tiny little small country. We are smaller than our northern neighbor 10 times in in each and every respect, I would say, and up to 100 times smaller than our eastern neighbor. And even our southern neighbor, Uzbekistan, is twice as big as Kazakhstan in terms of its population. So I should also mention in economic development, the Tengiz field, the cooperation with Chevron played an outstanding role for the economic development of Kazakhstan, paving the way for massive foreign direct investments. And the US is one of the largest investors in Kazakhstan, with total investments exceeding over 53 billion US dollars. And well, almost 80% of all FDI to the region belongs, were invested in Kazakhstan. And this brought about huge change. In terms of per capita, Kazakhstan started as a country with slightly over $700 in per capita GDP. Now we're talking about the high middle income country, whose economy is bigger than combined economies of all other Central Asian nations. This is the transformation. And if I can also name few achievements of current days, Kazakhstan was the leading driver behind the establishment of C5+1 regional dialogue platform. And today it's the third administration which utilizes this very important instrument of regional dialogue. It focuses on working closely with our US partners in spheres of security, economy, and environmental protection, and many more issues of regional interaction are to come. We are, of course, talking about Afghanistan. Kazakhstan has been a steadfast support of reconstruction, rehabilitation of Kazakhstan, and we were pushing for the view not to see Afghanistan as the threat, but as a window of opportunity for Kazakhstan, for entire Central Asia, which is all of Central Asian countries are landlocked. So we share the same sentiments, we share the same goals in our foreign policy issues. We also have a prospective agenda. Kazakhstan, along with Uzbekistan, we signed Central Asia Investment Partnership with DFC. This hopefully will be a new instrument for stimulating investment into the regional economies. Kazakhstan, thanks to our partners at US Chamber of Commerce, we established the Kazakhstan-US Trade and Investment, Kazakhstan-US Business Council, and this upcoming June 14th, we will be hosting Kazakhstan-US Trade and Investment Forum, and we invite all the participants to attend that important event. As I said, we had excellent interaction on COVID-19. Kazakhstan is among very few countries which developed its own vaccine, Kazvak, and we are now working with our US partners on international certification. It's been rolling out in the country. We have made Kazvak available and very much look forward to making it available to other countries. That will be our tangible input to defeat COVID-19. Of course, climate change is a big issue now, and it's big issue in our bilateral interaction. So very much look forward to work closely with Special Envoy Kerry, with the US government overall, to making sure that Kazakhstan, both Kazakhstan and Central Asia, are an integral part, are contributors in this important battle. I should also mention a couple of other important areas of our interaction. Counterterrorism. Now famous Zhusan operation, Kazakhstan pioneered the repatriation of over 700 of its nationals from zones formerly controlled by ISIL, and this is our tangible input in making sure that we'll never again be seeing such a threat. So we now are working on rehabilitation and reintegration programs, and this is even though we are talking about mostly kids, up to 500 kids and 180 plus women were repatriated overall. We're talking about small number, but this is important, very important area of our cooperation, and which would probably, if we succeed in repatriation and reintegration in Kazakhstan, then we can set an example for so many other countries to follow our lead. And finally, women economic empowerment. Kazakhstan is definitely historically been a natural partner in this area. It's enough to say that the biggest bank in Kazakhstan and the only state-run bank, both of them are led by women. So this is indicative of the role of women in business sector of Kazakhstan, and we very much look forward to making sure that we do tap this potential, we do utilize this potential for post-COVID-19 recovery, and overall to making sure that we do make sure that women enjoy equal rights, equal opportunities, equal ways of equal opportunities in their lives in Kazakhstan and broader in Central Asian region. So I try to cover as many issues as possible. It's probably given the depth of our and scope of our cooperation, it's impossible to cover everything in those 10-15 minutes I've been given graciously. But let me stop here, and I hand over the torch to the moderator, to esteemed ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ashokbayev, for your keynote remarks and that very detailed information about current initiatives in Kazakhstan. Today, we are joined by several highly distinguished diplomats, and we will begin with our panelists presenting opening remarks about their respective tenures as the U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan. Participants are welcome to submit their remarks for the panelists using the Q&A feature at the bottom of their screen at any time. Following opening remarks, we will have what I hope will be a robust discussion about 30 years of partnership between the United States and Kazakhstan. We will begin this morning with Ambassador William Courtney. Ambassador Courtney was the U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan from 1992 until 1995, and he currently serves as an adjunct senior fellow for the RAND Corporation. Ambassador Courtney.
Rian, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So I will reflect on the origins of U.S. relations with Kazakhstan. A lot of the current ties between Kazakhstan and the United States have their roots actually in the early years after independence. The United States was the first country to recognize Kazakhstan's independence. U.S. Embassy commenced operation in early February 1992, only 6 weeks after President Gorbachev signed the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and I arrived a week later. At the outset, it was clear that national consciousness in Kazakhstan was strong. The advent of independence at the end of 1991 surprised some in Kazakhstan, but the country was not wholly unprepared. The December 1986 Zheltoksan protests, the emergence in 1989 of the Nevada Semipalatinsk movement, and the closure of the polygon, Semipalatinsk, in 1991 caused many in Kazakhstan to doubt the wisdom of remaining under Moscow's subservience. There were concerns about the risks of Russian intervention at the outset. In fall 1991, President Yeltsin warned that ethnic Russian-dominated parts of Kazakhstan and Ukraine could not succeed from Russia. To his credit, however, he never acted on this warning. Nazarbayev ably piloted Kazakhstan to independence while ensuring its territorial integrity. He cooperated with Moscow when sensible and practical. This helped provide a stable climate for the development of Kazakhstan's sovereignty. In his memoir, The Politics of Diplomacy, former Secretary of State James Baker speaks of Kazakhstan as an early priority. In September 1991, and again in December 1991, Baker flew to Alma-Ata to meet with President Nazarbayev. These visits did much to build confidence. Kazakhstan made early economic reforms in such areas as market pricing, creation of a central bank and a government budget, and steps to attract foreign investment. But the Soviet legacy of statist domination and concentrated power slowed reforms. Of special importance was the early development of laws, regulations, and policies to attract foreign energy investment. As Ambassador Ashokbayev has already highlighted the importance of Tengiz, I would note that the U.S. strongly supported this investment project signed with Chevron in 1993. Tengiz was the first huge project with foreign participation anywhere in the former Soviet space. Kazakhstan in those days also began to move ahead on Kashagan and Karachaganak. Another U.S. priority at the beginning was denuclearization. In early 1992, I had extensive discussions on nuclear arms matters with President Nazarbayev and State Councilor Tulagan Zhukayev. They understood the broad international support for nonproliferation and the advantages of eliminating nuclear weapons from Kazakhstan. They were also aware that vital energy and economic cooperation with the West could be speeded if nuclear issues were resolved. In April 1992, Secretary Baker called President Nazarbayev. Baker said that in 1968, in the context of international negotiations on the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, the US had pledged to seek United Nations Security Council assistance if any non-nuclear weapon state were threatened by a nuclear power. Baker said that the US would repeat this pledge with respect to Kazakhstan. Nazarbayev thanked Baker and said he hoped the special relationship between the two countries would continue. The next month, in May 1992, 2 days before he was to meet with President George H.W. Bush in Washington, Nazarbayev called Baker and said Kazakhstan had received a collective security guarantee from Russia. This, combined with the US NPT security pledge, Nazarbayev said, would enable Kazakhstan to join the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START, and adhere to the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapon state. At the White House, Nazarbayev announced that Kazakhstan would sign the START protocol. Under it, Belarus, Kazakhstan, excuse me, under it, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine agreed to return nuclear weapons to Russia. Days later in Lisbon, Zhukayev signed the Lisbon Protocol on behalf of Kazakhstan. Representatives of other states did likewise. In January 1993, President Bill Clinton came to office. He, Vice President Al Gore, Secretary of State Warren Christopher, and Deputy Secretary of State Job Talbot continued the momentum in US relations with Kazakhstan. In his memoir, In the Stream of History, Christopher emphasized that the well-being of Kazakhstan and other former Soviet states was of utmost importance to America. In return for Kazakhstan's steps to reduce nuclear risks, the US, through the Nunn-Lugar program, helped Kazakhstan eliminate its nuclear weapons and associated infrastructure. Largely to these ends, in October 1993, Christopher visited Almaty. Vice President Gore followed with a visit in December 1993, during which Parliament endorsed adherence to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In February 1994, Nazarbayev again visited Washington. As Ambassador Ashikbayev noted, Nazarbayev and Clinton signed the important Charter on Democratic Partnership. Zhukayev and senior foreign ministry officials Vyacheslav Gizatov and Bolat Nurgaliev were driving forces behind this initiative. The charter outlines goals which remain relevant today. In these and other areas, US-Kazakhstan relations in the early years forged a strong and enduring foundation for future relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Courtney, for your remarks. We turn now to Ambassador John Ordway, who served as US Ambassador to Kazakhstan from 2004 to 2008, before returning as chargé in 2011, and again from 2013 to 2014. Ambassador Ordway.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here together, even if only virtually, with such great old friends as my former colleagues as Ambassador to Kazakhstan, and also with Yerzhan Ashbayev, who I knew very, very well during my time in Astana. I sort of been thinking about how to talk today. I came up with the theme of moving around, and I certainly did move around a lot when I was in Kazakhstan. We literally moved the embassy from Almaty to Astana. And I think the article that I wrote, short article I wrote, is up on the website with some pictures of that for anybody who wants to take a look at it. And I'll say a few words about that as well. But I think the reason behind moving around, and I also visited every single oblast in Kazakhstan in the court. It took me 6 years to do it, but I did manage to get to every single oblast in the world's 9th largest country, is because you have to move around in Kazakhstan in order to meet people, in order to see the differences in the country, in order to understand the country, in order to represent my country, the United States, to all the people of Kazakhstan in order to get a full picture of Kazakhstan and a complete picture of Kazakhstan and its existence and its problems, its opportunities, its advantages, and transmit those faithfully back to Washington to help create the best possible relationship that corresponds to the national interests of the two countries. So, as I said, that involved a lot of moving around. I should also preface this by saying that when I arrived in 2004 in Almaty, that was not the first time I was in Kazakhstan. I actually managed to beat Bill Courtney there by a few weeks, because I arrived on January 13th, 1992, with an Undersecretary of State who was very concerned about export controls. And you may wonder why we would be concerned about export controls in Kazakhstan in 1992. Well, we had a lot of very serious scientists in Kazakhstan who all of a sudden didn't have any way of working. And we wanted to make sure that we worked with Kazakhstan to make sure that they stayed in Kazakhstan and kept working there and didn't go to other countries where they might be a threat to world peace and stability. Anyway, it's a very quick visit, but I have very clear memories, including the first time I ever was at a dinner where someone got to carve up the sheep's head, distribute the little pieces around with great remarks, and I made good use of that experience in the years I personally spent in Kazakhstan. So anyway, when I did get to Almaty in September 2004, my office was in this tiny little building, which Bill will certainly remember well, on Furmanova Street. And the embassy was spread out all over town. So I had to move around town just to stay in touch with my embassy. But the bigger problem was the embassy was in Almaty, but all the government was in Astana. And there were a few embassies, most visibly the Russian, and a couple of other small embassies up in Astana, but everybody else was sticks in the mud back there in Almaty, although it was very pleasant mud to be a stick in, I do have to tell you. But we had made the decision actually, that we were going to build a new embassy compound in Astana, and that occurred when I was the ambassador. But we still had the problem of how to get up there, how to deal with the government. So I spent a lot of time on the move between Almaty and Astana, occasionally for a day, sometimes for a week or 10 days, sometimes for 3 or 4 days, and tried to do my job, even though I was living 600 miles away from where my job really should have been. And I was aided by a very small crew of Americans who were up there working out of a small office and trying to keep the relationships going on a day-to-day basis. Eventually, though, we did get the move made. We moved most of the embassy up to Astana. We kept some important parts back in Almaty. I had the great and I think unique opportunity to host President Nazarbayev for the dedication, including having him and his team have lunch in our residence there in Astana. So it was a tremendous start, and I think very symbolic of the relationship that had been established by Bill and my other predecessors, Laurie Napper, Beth Jones, and Dick Jones, that I just managed to sort of take over this ship that was moving forward. So I thought what I'd do is just sort of just highlight a few of the kinds of things that occupied my day when I was sitting there for that time. And in no particular order of importance, here are just some key areas. One, education. So we had a variety of exchange programs with Kazakhstan, ranging from high school students to postgraduates and scholars. But perhaps one of the most important things that the U.S. did, and it wasn't the U.S. government so much, it was to support the U.S. involvement in the establishment, development, and ongoing flourishing of Nazarbayev University, which has very strong and ongoing ties with the United States. Military. We had a really great program of military cooperation, which included training Kazakhstani officers in the U.S. I recall meeting the very first Kazakhstani to attend West Point as a cadet. We also worked very diligently and effectively on the development of Kazbat, which actually did deploy to Iraq as part of the international coalition there. And I also have some fond memories and actually a uniform left over from participating in opening and closing ceremonies for the annual Steppe Eagle exercise, which did allow U.S. and Kazakhstani forces to build excellent habits of cooperation on the ground in Kazakhstan. So energy's already been mentioned, but and Tengiz was clearly the jewel in the crown, as I think Steve Line said in his book that Chevron bet the future of the company on Kazakhstan and Kazakhstan bet the future on Chevron, and they both won their bets. But there were a couple of other major world-class fields there, including Karachaganak, in which Chevron was also an investor, and Kashagan, which included Exxon and Conoco among its partners when I was there. And we obviously, we're not oil people, we're not running those oil fields, but we did get involved to try to promote the relationship, to encourage everybody to have open dialogue when problems arose, and to ensure respect for contractual rights and obligations. And although Kashagan has been problematic at times and did take a while, it is now producing, and I think the partners need to be congratulated on sticking it out and actually getting to that stage. Peace Corps. We no longer have Peace Corps in Kazakhstan, but it was a very vital and important component of the relationship on a person-to-person level. It brought mostly young, but we actually had grandparents show up as Peace Corps volunteers. They mostly went out into the rural countryside, actually mostly the Kazakh-speaking rural countryside, and not only brought an appreciation for the broader world, but they helped teach English, and they did a variety of things. And they also established a small base of big fans of Kazakhstan that is still important to this day, and people who have built their careers in foreign affairs and have the kind of knowledge of Kazakhstan that you can't get even if you're sitting in the ambassador's residence in Kazakhstan for 6 years. Space. The US for many years has been launching and retrieving its astronauts to the International Space Station from Baikonur, which is in Kazakhstan. And my wife and I will never forget going to Baikonur and watching the launch of a multinational team of astronauts, including American, off to space. Unbelievable, exciting experience. But it also involved every time the astronauts came home, the US deployed a team, an emergency medical and rescue team to help supplement the local forces in case anything went wrong. It never did, but it was another part of that sort of relationship in areas that you may not think about with Kazakhstan. Law enforcement, a whole variety of US programs provided training, assistance to Kazakhstan law enforcement agencies, including things like counter narcotics, trafficking in persons, which is still a problem and which we're still continuing to cooperate on. And there were times when US law enforcement, including the FBI, had very effective and mutually beneficial cooperation on specific criminal cases. Health. Ambassador Ashokbayev mentioned COVID-19, but we have a long history of cooperation and coordination with health. CDC has had a very long-standing and very effective program of cooperation with their Kazakhstani counterparts, especially in disease detection and surveillance. I don't have any details, but I hope that's paid off in the development of a corps of Kazakhstani health specialists who were well equipped to deal with the pandemic there, or at least better than they would have been without that type of collaboration. And the non-Lugar program was also actively increasing Kazakhstan's laboratory capacity, including the construction of BSL-3 Central Reference Laboratory, which I visited before it got going and was delighted many years later to go back and see actually in operation and working effectively. Non-proliferation has already been mentioned, I think, and the test round with semi-pelotons. During my period of time, what we really concentrated on was securing the test ground to ensure that whether it was smugglers or people who were trying to seek radio or nuclear materials that could be useful from a proliferation standpoint, that they would not have access to those test zones. And this involved very close and careful collaboration between US, Russian, and Kazakhstani authorities. It went off brilliantly without a hitch. And there's now actually extensive publicity. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency has a series of videos with a lot of very interesting details and views of that project. And then last, but certainly not least, is democracy and governance. And while a lot of attention is paid to various international statements of reaction to particular events, the ambassador mentioned reducing the threshold for parties to enter into parliament, that we've had big public spats about the composition of parliament and demonstrations and so forth. But I think the more important aspect of the work was the work that we actually did on the ground over these years to support Kazakhstan's democratic aspirations and development. And it involved work at multiple levels, from towns and villages to parliament, to strengthen institutions, to improve communications with citizenry, and to develop the rule of law. So anyway, that just concludes my very brief tour de horizon of things, the kinds of things that kept me busy every day when I kept when I showed up to work. So thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ordway, for your remarks. And now we'll hear from Ambassador Richard Hoagland. Ambassador Hoagland served as the U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan from 2008 to 2011, and he is now the chair of the Caspian Policy Center's Security and Politics Program. Ambassador Hoagland.
Thank you very much. What I want to do in these brief comments this morning is tell you a behind-the-scenes story about diplomacy. Kazakhstan's first president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, undertook fundamental changes from the beginning of his tenure that actually internationalized his nation like no other country in the region. Nearly 20 years after that, in 2010, he was eager to showcase that nation and its real achievements to the world. And when Kazakhstan gained the annually rotating OSCE chairmanship in 2010, he suggested hosting in his new capital, Astana, a relatively rare OSCE summit. Such events are a common part of international diplomacy, but not to be unexpected, this one became controversial in Washington. During the George W. Bush and Barack Obama presidential administrations, the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, known by the acronym DRL, played an important role in US foreign policy, especially in the countries of the former Soviet Union. And DRL was not overly pleased with Kazakhstan because it had not quickly become a free market democracy after independence. Political opposition parties, when they were allowed to exist, were tightly controlled, and civil society non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, that the United States and the European Union supported were matched in Kazakhstan by government-created, and some said government-owned NGOs that DRL sometimes used the negative acronym GONGO to describe: government organized non-government organizations. Further, the working level in DRL bemoaned what they called President Nazarbayev's cult of personality, because he was allowing things like the new International University in Astana to be named after him. When I would argue with these folks that the capital city of the United States is named after our first president, we have a state in the Northwest named after our first president, almost every city in the United States has a street named after our first president, they would reply, ah, yes, but Nazarbayev isn't dead yet. Well, anyway, a high-level OSCE meeting includes official side meetings by the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, known by the acronym ODIHR. And what they do in these side meetings is have the host country's NGOs meet with their international supporters. And this is an official part of any high-level meeting, whether it's a ministerial or a presidential summit. Well, President Nazarbayev decided that such meetings would not be a part of the summit in Astana. Only his gongos would be allowed to participate. After much contentious behind the scenes and often late night negotiation, the compromise was finally reached that ODIHR could indeed have its traditional NGO meetings during the summit, but not at the official summit site in Astana's new city. Instead, they would take place several miles away at a university in the old city of Astana. No one was really pleased, but that's the compromise of diplomacy. The day was saved by compromise on both sides, and everything moved forward. Now, my job as US ambassador at that moment was to keep Foreign Minister Kanat Sadabayev, whom I knew well from his time in Washington as Kazakhstan's ambassador. My job was to keep him up to date on the level of US participation in the summit. I knew beyond any doubt that President Obama himself would not be traveling to Astana. But as for the name of the real US high-level government participant, I had to continue using the standard diplomatic phrase, "It's under discussion." Sadabayev was not overly pleased. And as the date of the summit approached, he became increasingly displeased, insisting that he had to tell the boss, President Nazarbayev, who was coming from Washington. With my fingers crossed behind my back, I continually responded, "It's still under discussion because of complicated schedules, but I assure you we will have high-level representation." In fact, DRL in the State Department lost their hard-fought battle to get the United States to boycott the OSCE summit in Astana. But frankly, it wasn't until her plane was actually in the air that I was finally informed that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton would represent the United States. President Nazarbayev is satisfied. Foreign Minister Sadabayev was satisfied because President Nazarbayev is satisfied, and all went well. As often happens in the world of diplomacy, what you see in public is the ready for the camera's final result, but it hides all the hair pulling, sausage making, and sleepless nights of high drama that go on behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Hoagland. We turn now to Ambassador George Kroll, who served as U.S. Ambassador to Kazakhstan from 2015 to 2018 and is now an adjunct professor at the U.S. Naval War College. Ambassador Kroll.
Thank you, Brianne. May I ask how much time do I have? I don't want to impinge on questions and discussion. So
take your full time, sir.
Whatever that is. Okay. I stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say. So I will be brief. But first of all, I want to thank the Caspian Policy Center for inviting me to participate in this, and a very warm welcome to Ambassador Yerzhan Ashikbayev. I certainly like the ring of that, and Ambassador Yerzhan Ashikbayev, who long-suffering Deputy Foreign Minister dealing with the United States for so many years, and certainly with me. And I appreciate your patience and like. I would only suggest, Ambassador, that as John Ordway mentioned, that Kazakhstan is a huge country, and it took him 6 years to get to all the oblasts. The United States is pretty big too, so I would encourage you also to get out of the Washington bubble. Come to beautiful Newport, Rhode Island, where I am, or where John Ordway is in lovely California and the like as well. And and get away if you need a nice dose of what America's really like. Come and see us. And of course, as a Harvard man yourself, I'm sure you will have a warm welcome up at Harvard. I'm an associate at the Davis Center for Eurasian Studies. And I'd have to say, in that capacity where I used to go up there before the pandemic, it was another sign of this relationship between the United States and Kazakhstan. The number of students from Kazakhstan that are studying there, and I would meet with them informally, and we would talk all about Kazakhstan and its relationship, and also that the head of the Central Asia program at the Davis Center, Nargis Kasenova, is herself an academic from Kazakhstan, and is really is building that program, which not only is Central Asia but the Caucasus as well. So I'm sure you'll find a very warm welcome back home there as well. So I would look forward to seeing you, not just virtually and the like as well. But and now to the subject at hand, I would just say that, again, I stand on the shoulders of giants of my predecessors, and from what they have described is quite clear. The building of a relationship from the get-go, of a partnership, which is, I would say, as somebody who's dealt with Central Asia over the years, is unique among all the countries. And that started from the very beginning. Not only was I ambassador to Kazakhstan from 2015 when I got there to when I left in 2015 till I left in 2018. Prior to that, my first experience was actually traveling to Kazakhstan when the capital was Almaty with Ambassador James Collins, who was the then ambassador at large for the new independent states, with Ashton Carter, who at the time was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy, and Beth Jones was ambassador. And we flew to Almaty. And I'd have to say that the meetings, as Ambassador Courtney mentioned, the relationship that the first president of Kazakhstan, Nazarbayev, had developed, certainly with James Baker, which was a unique, close, and frankly, not just a diplomatic, or it was a personal relationship, but it was quite clear to me, even as a very junior person on our delegation, that the relationship between President Nazarbayev and American officials and American delegations was unique because of the vision of that. It wasn't just in traveling to other parts as we did of Central Asia. Many were focused very much on the very domestic issues of that particular country, which is understandable. This is 1995 coming out. But when in Kazakhstan, there was that broader vision that the president had, so that the relationship was not just discussing, oh, this is the Kazakhstan issue, et cetera, but it was the broader issue that it was a real conversation in which there was advice given, and President Nazarbayev really knew how to deal with Americans who like to do all the talking, and the like, but to listen, but also to provide a certain advice about how to deal with broader issues, the neighborhood, the region, as well as even world issues. And that has developed over time. And my next iteration, when I came to be Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Central Asian Affairs from 2008 to 2010, that this was another occasion where I could see that the relationship the United States and Kazakhstan had developed again into a strategic partnership, as it was officially called at that time, because we dealt with many issues that went somewhat beyond the bilateral issues of Kazakhstan and the United States. And I mean, there was a visit, as Ambassador Hoagland may remember, of President Nazarbayev to Washington in which he met on the sidelines with President Obama on the nuclear summit. Dick probably remembers that well. And again, the discussion wasn't just purely on bilateral issues, but broader issues. And the fact that President Nazarbayev was there for this nuclear summit showed that Kazakhstan was a player in this regard of dealing with non-proliferation issues, as we've heard from my previous colleagues. But also, I remember then Ambassador Ashikbayev's predecessor, and also boss at one point, Ambassador. There was Ambassador Yerlan Idrisov. We were always on the telephone on all sorts of issues. I mean, my cell phone would ring or whatever. I'd be in the car, and I'd say, Yerlan, it's another one. And we dealt with crises. For instance, there was the issue of what happened in Kyrgyzstan when Bakiyev fell and the transitional government came in, and then the horrific events in the south of Kyrgyzstan and all of the turmoil. And I'd have to say that while this, that in the discussions with Ambassador Idrisov and with the Kazakhstani government, it was very important, the role that they played in calming the situation, because it showed they had an interest in the regional issue and dealing with the bigger players around. So it was a unique experience, but also it shows that relationship that we had, where we covered. There were the war in Georgia with Russia and the like, and this also impinged on the relationship with countries in Central Asia, particularly Kazakhstan. But the way of how to react and deal with it was very important for me as the Deputy Assistant Secretary to have Kazakhstan's input, and it was something that they readily gave as a partner, how to deal with this to have the least amount of damage to relationships the United States had with other countries in the region, including with Kazakhstan. So that when I got to Kazakhstan itself as ambassador, we had, again, as Ambassador Ashikbayev said, an enhanced strategic partnership, and in which we dealt with many issues. And in my little write-up that I guess is going to be published, as Ambassador Ashikbayev would remember, the issue of Kazakhstan's role in the completion and success of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran was, again, a behind-the-scenes effort. But because Kazakhstan had the low-enriched uranium and had relationships with Iran, with Russia, with the United States, when the American delegation needed the help of Kazakhstan or the assistance in order to provide low-enriched uranium and the like, Kazakhstan stepped up, and we had discussions, groups that came in order to work out. And this was a multi-country effort. I mean, the Norwegians were paying, there were Russians, Iranians, Kazakhstanis, and as Ambassador Ashikbayev knows, many phone calls, including at 3 in the morning between the foreign minister and myself and him, and then deputy foreign minister, to basically get this done in time to meet the deadline for this agreement to come into force. Again, a behind-the-scenes issue, but it was something that was unique because of the relationship we had of dealing with these bigger issues. And I know also, when on the economic side, if it wasn't for Kazakhstan's help, the United States probably would not have had a pavilion at the Astana World's Fair on Energy. I don't want to go into the gory details, but it was important for the relationship in this crucial area for the United States to be there, and for Kazakhstan too. And Kazakhstan saw this as well. And it was really a joint effort to get this done as kind of a highlight of the American, if you will, interest in the economy of Kazakhstan and in the broader issues of climate change and dealing with alternative forms of energy and the like. Again, a sign of a partnership that is based on mutual interest and mutual respect. We had the C5+1, which again, I know that in the development of that, we worked closely with Kazakhstan when I was ambassador there on the whole concept and how to make this something possible. And so therefore, when John Kerry, he went to the inaugural meeting in Samarkand, but went to Kazakhstan afterwards and met with President Nazarbayev. And again, that conversation was something that went well beyond just the bilateral agenda to many other issues of a regional and global nature that again exemplified the ease that we could discuss these issues. And then, another issue too that I had tried to avoid the Middle Eastern issues all my career, but then Kazakhstan offered to be a venue for the discussion of a ceasefire in Syria, and I was designated as the American observer for one time. So I had to get up to speed on Syrian issues, but again, it was an issue that also showed Kazakhstan's willingness to bring people together on broader issues than simply their narrow bilateral issues that they had. And then we had the visit of President Nazarbayev to the White House in my final year of 2018, in which there was a lunch and quite a freewheeling lunch with President Trump at the time. Again, exemplifying, I have to say that the issues and areas they discussed went well beyond what was, the bureaucrats on both sides had set up the talking points and these are the issues and like. But again, when the two leaders got together, it was clear. And again, President Nazarbayev knew how to deal with Americans to listen, but also impart very important views. And again, I would say that, and Ambassador Ashikbayev knows this quite well, being a partner of the United States is difficult. I mean, it can be excruciating difficult, as Ambassador Hoagland mentioned in his act. But it takes a certain understanding and tact of how you deal with Americans and their expectations and their desires and their demands. I mean, things that we dealt with, like, you know, the transit of cargoes through Kazakhstan, like sensitive for a country like Kazakhstan, but the willingness to listen and find constructive ways to deal with the issues where we disagree, but also the issues, those strategic issues that we agree on, that we can play important roles together. And so therefore, over these 30 years, I have witnessed, and not just when I was ambassador, this development of a strategic partnership. And again, partnerships are not alliances, but they're also not easy, and they're not easy to maintain. And I could see that, you know, President Tokayev is, of course, a person we all know from his diplomatic experience and as prime minister and the like, carries on this tradition of dealing with Americans, Russians, Chinese, and like in a very, of course, geographic and geopolitically sensitive area. Which is why this partnership is so important to nurture and to keep moving and be vibrant, because it is something that benefits the United States, it benefits Kazakhstan, but it benefits a broader set of issues and values. So I was privileged to be a part of that, and to be not just a witness, but actually working. I'm not getting phone calls at 3 a.m. and I hope, Yerjan, you're not getting three, but if it happens, it happens, and you know, and we've dealt with it. And that's part of doing business together and being partners, is that you can pick up the phone, or, you know, you make the call, or we make the call, but there is a serious discussion and something comes out of it. And finally, I would just say one of my proudest achievements, you know, I say this to my colleagues as former ambassadors, I put a Kazakhstani yurt up at that residence, and it exists to this day, I think. So anyways, and I believe Ambassador Ashikbayev remembers well the inauguration of that, where we all drank kumis and shubat. And all I could ask is, if there's any way you could get the Department of Agriculture of the United States to allow shubat to be brought in to the United States, I would feel a lot healthier and better here in the United States, where I'm back at home in Rhode Island. So anyways, thank you all very much. And again, welcome, Ambassador Ashikbayev. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kroll, for your remarks. And now we will begin the discussion segment of today's event. As a reminder to everyone, participants are welcome to submit their questions for any of the speakers using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. I know we already have questions coming in, but in the meantime, I'm going to exercise the prerogative of the moderator and begin with a question for Ambassador Courtney and Ambassador Ordway. So one of the things that we often talk about in relation to Central Asia is the fact that we have not had high-level visits, specifically a visit by a US president. However, both of you had a visit by a US vice president. So Ambassador Courtney, if you could tell us a little bit about when Vice President Gore came to town, and Ambassador Ordway, when Vice President Cheney visited, some of your reflections on those visits, please.
Thank you, Bjorn. So Vice President Gore's visit to Kazakhstan was really a crescendo represented a crescendo of several visits, including by Deputy Secretary Strobe Talbot and Secretary Christopher. But Kazakhstan was making a really important step in adhering to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapon state. That was a keystone of the visit because Parliament approved it. But secondly, the Tengiz project had made an enormous amount of progress. And so we were trying to give attention to that. Thirdly, I'd like to point out that Kazakhstan got off to a great start. It had good neighbors, good relations with all of its neighbors. President Azerbaith proposed the creation of a Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, SICA, which has turned out to be a success. So I think Vice President Gore wanted to celebrate the achievements, if you will, of Kazakhstan as developing as a partner to countries in the region, as well as a partner of the United States, a peaceful partner. And that was really quite an accomplishment. I'd like to note that at the beginning, it wasn't clear whether the Central Asian states were all going to remain independent or whether they might combine together under a capital in Tashkent or go be part of Russia again. People were unsure, but Kazakhstan really led the way in the region and making a really successful successful, let's say, creation of an independent state that had international recognition. And President Nazarbayev's genius was that by opening up to the outside world, Kazakhstan would enhance its independence, enhance respect for its sovereignty, and that was a successful strategy. So Vice President Gore's visit related to all of those activities.
Ambassador Ordway?
So let me make this a drama in 3 acts. The first act is before the arrival. And we had a fairly young and inexperienced team of staffers who came to do what's called advance work, where you try to set up the visit and make sure each venue is properly prepared, everybody knows who's going to participate, everybody knows what's going on. And it was sort of like medieval jousting. They kept going at each other. The poor embassy, we were in the middle trying to make peace between these 2 warring sides, each of which had no flexibility whatsoever. So we were tearing our hair out at the embassy, just trying, what in the world are we going to do? And I will note that the embassy was actually not in Astana at that point. So we only had a really small little team of people there. It was not your normal situation. So that's how the first act went. The second act is the actual visit. And Vice President Cheney flew to Astana from Lithuania. And while he was in Lithuania, he had hurled verbal rounds of fire in the direction of Moscow and all the horrible things that were going on with democracy and human rights and everything. It was not that we don't do that kind of thing all the time, but Vice President Cheney was particularly skilled at getting underneath people's skin with this sort of invective, or speeches, whatever you want, however you want to say. So he arrived, and we had a little briefing for him, and I described the situation in the country, which included, in point of fact, a lot of steps moving on the democratic path, a lot of achievements, but still a good way to go. A very vigorous, but very much sidelined group of opposition parties. And then we went off to the Akroda and had this meeting. So we had about, I think, 35 seconds with everybody in the meeting, and then they kicked everybody out, including me. So we were only left with the interpreter, and they were in there for an hour. Luckily, I eventually did find out from the interpreter what had happened. I would point out that Kazakhstan had an excellent interpreter who is now their ambassador to the United Nations there. So I'm sure he did a fantastic job of recording for posterity exactly what was said between the 2 leaders. They then came out and had the traditional post-meeting press availability, where when it came his turn, instead of hurling invective on the neighbor to the north, which would have been a bad thing to do in Kazakhstan, he instead chose to go the complete opposite way and talk about what great achievements President of Kazakhstan had in implementing democracy, which went over very well with the president and with the government, but drove the opposition, whom we had very fragile relations, absolutely it just drove them out of their minds. And then before he left for the airport, the President Azerbaith said, "Oh, why don't you come have a drink with me?" So they went over to the Intercontinental Hotel, sat down in the Irish bar, again with only the Kazakhstani interpreter, and nobody knows to this day what they spent an hour. I saw them talking, but I never actually found out what they were talking about for that whole hour. Then he sped off to the airport and we waved a fond farewell. And did I mention it was very, very cold and windy when he was there. That's the end of Act 2. Act 3 was me meeting with all of our friends in the opposition, trying to assure them that, yes, we knew they were there, and yes, we strongly supported their right to engage in full democratic process and so forth. So it took me a long time to get them back to the point where they would even look at us straight in the face. So that's my drama in 3 acts of the vice presidential visit.
Excellent stories from both of you, so thank you so much. We have questions coming in, and trade seems to be a popular topic. So a question for the US ambassadors and also for Ambassador Ashokbayev about current activities to increase business-to-business opportunities between the United States and Kazakhstan. Ambassador Ashokbayev, if you would like to respond to this, and then we'll turn it over to the US ambassadors.
Yes, surely. Of course, distances does matter when it comes to economic trade and economic relations. On top of that, as I've already mentioned, Kazakhstan is a landlocked nation, and the farthest point on the landmass from the open seas is also situated in Kazakhstan. And it's probably a symbolic coincidence that it's very close, that point is very close to Horgos border crossing point on Kazakh-Chinese border, where a big dry port is now functions. So what are the prospects? Kazakhstan recently, as I mentioned in my remarks, established the US-Kazakhstan Business Council and the US Chamber of Commerce. That opens, we believe, new avenues. It's not only G2G relationships, but increasingly we can pave the way for B2B relationship. As I said, distances does matter, but opening up new ways of interaction this time around through our US partners in US Chamber of Commerce will definitely be a big impetus, will be giving big impetus to the development of trade relations. Of course, we are talking about anchor investments, as did Chevron, paving the way again for so many US energy companies to Kazakhstan. We are now in very close negotiations with Tyson Food and Valmont investments in Kazakhstan, and we're very much hopeful that once implemented, these investment projects will be an anchor projects for this time around in agricultural sector. And Kazakhstan has an immense potential in that area. And also Kazakhstan is neatly situated close to huge markets of China, Russia, but also we are eyeing Gulf countries, Iran, and then also South Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, with its booming protein consumption. That's what Kazakhstan could well be serving. So, and equally so, we are open to utilize all other types of different types of opportunities. Kazakhstan is landlocked countries, and as Ambassador Kroll mentioned, Minister Idrisov, Ambassador Idrisov, who also served here, and he coined the phrase turning landlockedness into landlinkedness. So we are trying to exploit and revive, I would say, the Great Silk Road in modern times. So the incident in Suez Channel once again demonstrated that it will be wise to diversify for exporters on both sides. I mean, both in Europe and in China. So we are witnessing a booming of transit cargo transportation through the territory of Kazakhstan for the past several years already. And this is something that offers immense potential. And Kazakhstan invested a lot into its road infrastructure for the past 25 years. And linkages that we've invested in could well be a common good, not only for us, but also for other Central Asian countries. And we are trying to increase regional connectivity within Central Asia, so everyone can chip in and thereby create a much bigger economic value in the region and beyond.
Thank you, Ambassador Ashokbayev. For the US ambassadors, any thoughts on investment, or more specifically, the Blue Dot Network or the Central Asia Investment Partnership that Kazakhstan, the United States, and Uzbekistan are a partner of? Ambassador Kroll?
Yes, I would just say that, you know, when I was ambassador, but also as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, that it was always rather frustrating, you know, with the development of trade and economic ties between the United States and Kazakhstan, as well as with other Central Asian countries. I mean, there is, of course, the, you know, the flagship Tengiz and Karachaganak, you know, these go back into history of the 1990s, you know, the Great Deal and the like, and the development of those fields. And that's really where most of the American, if you will, presence and investment is, but trying to diversify it and expand it out beyond that special case has been a problem. And I know it's something that Ambassador Ashokbayev is the Deputy Foreign Minister, but the other ministries in Kazakhstan, as well as when I would participate in these, the Prime Minister's sort of joint session with that was organized by the American Kazakhstani Chamber, the American Chamber of Commerce there. I'd say one of the biggest obstacles has been just the legal system. That is what is called rule of law, that there are certain cases and things of this nature that have proven to be problematic for those and for companies that were doing or are doing business there and seeking redress and a fair hearing and that through the court system in Kazakhstan and the like. And there has been, I think, a fair amount of disappointment on the side of those who are doing business there and the like, of how difficult it is and how hard it takes, that you really still have to like make special representations to the Prime Minister and the other, then having a system that works, that people can trust, is going to render fair judgments, even according to Kazakhstan's laws, which are very progressive. And I would say very attractive, should be very attractive, but the devil's in the details and implementation. And again, it's always a difficult issue in any country. And I've seen this, you know, elsewhere, of how you implement those laws and ensure that they are being fulfilled. And there aren't issues of special pleading or corruption, or there is, you know, issues of influencing the judgments and things of this nature. So that has been, I think, to get the confidence of potential investors and workers is essential to work on this issue over the reliability of the legal system. I mean, the laws are there, and there are people much gone into training and the like, but that has been, I think, if there's one issue that has been a problem to address, that would be it.
Ambassador Courtney.
Yes, thank you. I would agree fully with Ambassador Kroll. Rule of law is critically important for investors. A second issue is that state enterprises in Kazakhstan and large holding companies that are well connected control so much of the economy that there are not enough spaces for private foreign investors to come in to enter the economy. So reducing the state's role in the economy along with rule of law, could be important for expanding investment.
Ambassador Hoagland?
Jan, my colleagues have made many good points about current status of investment and sometimes the problems that come and prevent investment. But what I want to do is very briefly just say that I was very, very pleased to find that American private companies already working in Kazakhstan when I was the ambassador were extremely good partners for the American embassy. They had their own business organization. They wanted to know what the current talking points were, and they were very good at doubling what we had to say. So it was clear to the diplomats who were saying this, it was the American people too. And I found that very useful. The only thing I'm going to add right now is that I'm going to have to leave in just a few minutes because I must get to the State Department for a meeting real soon. But thank you to everyone for the great opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Ambassador Hoagland. Ambassador Ordway, did you have anything to add?
Just very quickly, just sort of following on a little bit from what Ambassador Hoagland said, which is that I think there have been a number of smaller American companies that have been involved in Kazakhstan and have been very successful in particular niche areas without any of the problems that exist with some of the bigger companies that are trying to come in and not just invest but compete. And so there's got to be a better recognition and some better way of making sure that if you really want the big guys to come in there, that you do the things necessary to make it possible for them not just to come in and invest, but to operate and to prosper.
We also have several questions about Kazakhstan's participation in different multilateral organizations and how that impacts the US relationship. Specifically Kazakhstan's role in the Turkic Council, the Council of Europe, and the Eurasian Economic Union. Any thoughts on what that means for the US relationship with Kazakhstan?
Let me just say very briefly that in general, speaking broadly, we've always welcomed Kazakhstan's participation in these types of international organizations or non-governmental even organizations, because we have a great relationship with Kazakhstan. It's very easy for us to talk with Kazakhstan. We trust Kazakhstan is going to have a moderate, role and an outlook that will be compatible with ours. So generally speaking, we really don't have very many issues with Kazakhstan in that area. And there can be times like with the Turkic Council where it's important, and there are issues going on where we may not get in, and we can use Kazakhstan as a way to try to both get a better understanding and maybe try to get some little influence or some sort of messages through there, without in any way implying that Kazakhstan is acting on our behalf. They just are a good partner for us when these things happen.
Ambassador Kroll.
Yes, I would say one thing I forgot to note that when I was ambassador there, Kazakhstan achieved its becoming a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, which Ambassador Ashikbayev knows was quite an effort that he and since he was also as Deputy Foreign Minister in charge of international organizations, his head was on the block, as we know, with of course, and Foreign Minister Idrisov. To make this happen. And again, for the United States, it was not a matter of we were once involved in voting, but certainly there was a lot of effort to ensure that, that Kazakhstan would be, as it was, a responsible and member of the Security Council. And then when they achieved it, which I remember, fondly, that they were very good members in working with the delegations in the United States delegation and others on some very, very tough and serious issues, which Ambassador Ashikbayev knows. As far as Kazakhstan's membership and all these other ones, including their, in the Collective Security Treaty Organization with Russia, and not just the Eurasian Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Again, Kazakhstan has its own views and the like. But what was beneficial was that in meeting with Kazakhstan as a partner, they could impart to us, certain things that they took away from these meetings that were helpful, because frankly, since the United States was not a member of them, we didn't, and also not having that many ties or talks. I mean, we would have directly with Russia, for instance, but as those seemed to wither, it was important to, listen to, what our Kazakhstani partners would say. I mean, again, they would keep things within themselves in this, obviously, too. But that their membership in this was also something that, gave us, I think, a certain, understanding of the dynamics of those organizations and their interests and things of that nature, which are useful to know. And so that's my point I would make about the other organizations too, like Organization of Islamic, states and things of this nature too.
Ambassador Courtney.
Yes, let me just add that Kazakhstan's strategy for being engaged in multilateral organizations really has been important for its sovereignty and independence. As a country that has incredibly valuable natural resources and not very many people, it makes sense for a country like that to engage others around the world. Kazakhstan did that not only with the Seeker proposal that President Nazarbayev proposed in 1994, but in the nuclear nonproliferation multilateral world and in a number of other multilateral fora. And this really has helped Kazakhstan achieve recognition globally of its sovereignty and independence. So as a strategy for the country, it's been very successful.
We only have a few minutes remaining, so I will turn it over to Ambassador Ashokbayev for any final remarks he would like to make.
Well, thank you so much. That has been a fascinating series of events, memories, and I'm so grateful to my colleagues, US ambassadors, for sharing those views and giving sometimes behind the scene rationale of why certain events happened. And of course, there are certain issues in our bilateral relations. Not everything is perfect in from US viewpoint in certain spheres of our interaction. But what is important always is that Kazakhstan stands ready and always keeps channels of communication open. And this has been, I would say, one of the trademarks of Kazakh diplomacy overall. And even the last question on our participation in multilateral institution is also refers to that quality. We are seeing ourselves not only as a natural land bridge, but also as bridge builders in different spheres. And by keeping our channels of communication open with different sides, we are in position and we are trying to be capable of bridging those gaps and resolving misunderstanding, which is so often the case. So very much look forward to continuing our interaction with Caspian Policy Center, with distinguished ambassadors, and I'm so blessed that we have such an outstanding ambassadors, and not only present during current discussion, but also others. Very much look forward, and as I said, Excellencies, you have a standing invitation to visit Kazakh embassy and to visit Kazakhstan, and we have a lot not only to recall, but also, I believe, to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ashokbayev. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Efkan.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for great moderation. And I'd like to personally thank to all our participants and Ambassador Kroll, Ambassador Courtney, Ambassador Ordway, Ambassador Hoagland for attending today's event and making remarks. Ambassador Ashokbayev, once again, welcome to Washington, and we look forward to working with you and with your team for our future events, and we look forward to engaging all of you ambassadors for our future engagements with the region. Once again, thanks to our team at the CPC as well for putting this event together. Also, I'd like to remind that the articles by the ambassadors are available on our website. Please do check out and see their insights. Also, we have a upcoming forum on 9th and 10th of June on the 5th Trans-Caspian Forum. I'd like to encourage all the attendants to that event. And I'd like to once again thank everyone for attending to this today's discussion. We look forward to engaging with you in the future. Thanks so much.